Yo, what up guys, I'm Sammy and welcome back to the Sole Drop. In this video, we're going to be doing an initial comparison between the Nike GT Cut 3, the original one, and the Nike GT Cut 3 Turbo, right? So the Turbo retails for 210 bucks, but this is the black label colorway, and the original GT Cut 3 retailed for 190 bucks. But there are some colorways available for like 125 bucks, which is a very good price, especially for the tech and also the performance that you're getting. So if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, I'll try to leave in the affiliate link in the description box. But let's get it started right off with the Traxione. So as far as the traction pattern goes, it is identical. But as far as the rubber goes, we have a translucent rubber here in the original GT Cut 3 for this colorway that I have. And then here in the Turbo, this seems like a solid rubber, right? So yeah, I did have a little bit of a dust issue for the GT Cut 3. Picked up a little bit of dust. It wasn't terrible or anything. It was still phenomenal for performance, but hopefully the Turbo version with the solid rubber is a little bit better and picks up a little bit less dust. But yeah, the GT Cut 3 had phenomenal performance on a clean court, and also light dust and moderate dust, still really nice. Amazing stops, top tier bites, and it feels like here in the Turbo it's gonna be extremely good as well. So yeah, I mean they kept the exact same herringbone traction pattern, and hopefully they didn't really change up the rubber compound. But like I said, just from my first impressions, this is feeling really good so far still. As far as the durability goes, I mean, they're both not going to be great. You know what I mean? First of all, they're both extremely expensive shoes, but the rubber is thin and the rubber is pretty dang soft for both of these. So probably not the best for outdoor use, right? One difference, however, is that here in the Turbo, it says there's a turbo plate. And it's just plastic, it feels like, you know what I mean? This plate on the bottom, but there is actual carbon fiber inside of the shoe. So there is the traction there. Moving on to the heel to toe transition, that's one thing that I loved about the original GT Cut 3, right? How springy it felt, you know what I mean? So as far as the overall shape goes, of course, we have a very curved shape here in the heel, and it's identical here in the Turbo, and here in the forefoot. Very curved shape, and it's identical here in the Turbo as well. However, the GT Cut 3, it's still really nice and springy, like one of the most springy feeling shoes of last year, and still right now, right? Here in 2025, like look at this. You can still bend it a good amount. I mean, I can't really bend it even just with my fingers. I definitely still need to put a good amount of force into it. It still bends, right? It still can bend, however, has a really nice kind of like springy feel to it, which I like, right? But then the GT Cut 3 Turbo takes it to another level and has a little bit more springiness, right? So we do have a carbon fiber plate, like I said, and I definitely need to put a little bit more force into it. Look at that. Definitely need to put more force into it. And then has a nice kind of like springy feel to it. You know what I mean? And it feels even springier than the original GT Cut 3, which I think is the biggest difference for the heel to toe transition. Again, it's not that big of a difference, but I definitely do like how they made it a little bit more resilient, a little bit more springy, which feels great. So there is the heel to toe transition there. Moving on to the cushioning setup. Also, the cushioning setup is pretty much identical besides one thing, right? So they're both using ZoomX foam, which feels pretty dang nice, right? I guess one difference is that the GT Cut 3, you know, if you look underneath the insole, we have a very large cutout actually, right? And because of that cutout, you can see the ZoomX foam, and it's not super soft even with this cutout, because we do have like, it's an oval shape, but we have like a very thick line going through it. You know what I mean? That's kind of like where your heel is. I don't know why they have that cutout. But yeah, when you feel the actual ZoomX, it's really soft. When you feel where that line is, it's actually a lot stiffer. You know what I mean? So either way, there's a little bit of a difference there, but the biggest difference, of course, is the insole, right? So for the original GT Cut 3, we have a very crappy, kind of like styrofoam feeling insole. You know what I mean? Not very plush, doesn't add too much to the overall step and comfort, and it just feels kind of cheap, you know what I mean? And especially for 190 bucks, you know? But then here in the Turbo, we have a very nice ZoomX insole, you know what I mean? So it does two things very well, which I love, right? So first of all, there's a really nice texture to it, right? Very similar to like drop-in midsoles. And I say it all the time in drop-in midsole setups where it gives you a really nice grip, you know what I mean? So it grabs your sock, and when you're putting this shoe on, it grabs your sock underneath your foot and kind of like scrunches it up, which is kind of annoying, you know what I mean? But once you fix that, you can definitely feel it has really improved lockdown and just locks your foot down inside of the shoe. because of that kind of like foam texture, which is one thing that I really like, right? But also, like, I didn't think it would add that much to the step and comfort because it's a really thin, it's like just an insole thickness, you know what I mean? Maybe even a little bit thinner than like a regular Ortholite insole, but it's Zoom X. And I guess because it is Zoom X, it actually feels pretty dang nice. It's soft, it's comfortable, it adds also a little bit of rebound back, like kind of a little bit of bounce for some reason. You know what I mean? So yeah, this insole actually improved the cushioning setup, or at least the step and comfort and underfoot cushion and how it feels right underneath my foot, just from my first impressions, right? As far as the strobel board goes, it's just a regular strobel board, you know what I mean? It feels very similar to the GT Cut 3, which kind of sucks, you know what I mean? But hopefully once I break it in, it does get a little bit kind of softer and bouncier, but that feels very similar. It's just the insole that feels nicer, and also the lockdown because of that insole. Here in the heel, we have a good amount of compression, which does feel nice. You know what I mean? It says it's Cushlon here for the turbo, you know what I mean, for the outsole carrier, for the midsole carrier, of course. But yeah, the original GT Cut 3 still had a nice bit of compression here in the heel. I don't know if it's placebo because the insole, right, the Zoom X insole, but it feels like the turbo has a little bit more compression. But again, it's still pretty similar for the midsole compression. So yeah, the overall cushioning setup feels very similar besides the step and comfort and a little bit of the underfoot cushion, which of course is a little bit of an improvement, you know what I mean? So there's the cushioning setup there. Moving on to the upper, so the upper is definitely a huge improvement in the quality department, in my personal opinion, right? So the original GT Cut 3 had this really crappy kind of like synthetic like suede material, and for 190 bucks, like, are you serious? It feels so cheap and crappy, right? But it is really thin. Overall, very supportive feeling for how thin it is, right? So I did like that. And also on the sides, we had like an embroidered part, you know, here on the lateral and medial side, which did add a little bit of structural rigidity and support to the overall upper here in the forefoot, right? But here in the GT Cut 3 Turbo, we have a kind of like rubbery plastic material on the sides, right here on the medial and lateral sides of the shoe. It reminds me a little bit of the AE1, but definitely not as thick and also not as stiff as the AE1, right? It definitely feels thicker than the GT Cut 3. It definitely feels a lot thicker, and also the GT Cut 3 is a lot softer for the material here in the toe box. However, this feels like still soft, you know what I mean? It like conforms to my foot very well still, even though it is a little bit stiffer, but also it feels a lot more supportive and just way more robust feeling, right? So I feel like it just depends on what type of upper you want to feel, right? So like both of these are nice. I mean, obviously for quality, if you want the better quality material, the turbo is better, but as far as like performance and how it feels, I feel like they're both nice, right? So the GT Cut 3 is just thinner, it's thinner feeling while still having good support, right? It's just softer. But then the turbo, right now it's feeling still soft, but also a lot more supportive and a lot more sturdy feeling, right? So again, they're both nice. It just depends on what type of feel you want here in like for your upper. We'll have to see on if the turbo gets softer, but right now it still feels pretty dang soft, right? For the midfoot, you know what I mean? Obviously the turbo feels more sturdy, right? More structurally supportive than the GT Cut 3, but still this was nice. And then for the tongue, they both kind of suck. You know, they don't have that much padding. And I like the GT Cut 3 material is also like very, very bad. They're both half woody construction tongues, giving you a better overall one-to-one fit. And then here in the ankle area, it's around the same. Maybe the turbo has a little bit more padding. Yeah, if I'm nitpicking, it has a little bit, just a tiny bit more padding, but very, very similar, right? So yeah, it is a very different feel. I feel like, you know, the upper is the biggest difference. Like it's the easiest to tell, like when you have both shoes on at the same time. But yeah, it is a different feel. And again, like I said, it is pretty subjective. But I feel like I like the turbo a little bit better, but still the GT Cut 3 on foot was still nice, right? And now moving on to the fit, literally the same, you know what I mean? I went true to size for the GT Cut 3 and true to size for the turbo, and it fits pretty much the exact same. However, I would say, I don't know, maybe it's because the upper is a little bit thicker, and also maybe it's because the Zoom X insole, maybe because of that as well. It feels a little bit more snug here in the toe box, but for the length, it's pretty much identical. Going true to size is good for me. Width-wise, it's identical as well. Slightly narrow fit. So yeah, it's a little bit more snug here in the Turbo, which I do like more. If you like more of a little bit more of a roomier fit, GT Cut 3 is a little bit better. However, it's not super roomy to the point where I hate the fit, you know what I mean? So there is the fit there. Moving on to the support and lockdown. I mean, the GT Cut 3 was really nice for me, and I feel like it's really good for most people, right? But the Turbo takes it to a whole nother level, right? So like, first of all, they injected carbon fiber here. That's what they said, right? For this piece right here in the forefoot. And it definitely feels a lot stiffer. Look at that. It's stiffer, more supportive. The GT Cut 3 is just this rubber material. It bends a lot easier. However, it's still like very good for lateral support, right? So didn't have any issues with this shoe, but they made this shoe more supportive, right? And then for the heel, we have an internal TPU heel counter in both of the shoes. So yeah, lateral containment, very, very good. It's just here in the forefoot, I guess it's a little bit more, it's on another level, you know what I mean? As far as the lateral stability goes, I mean, it's gonna be the exact same pretty much, probably, right? Yeah, same width here in the forefoot as well as here in the heel, and I had zero issues with lateral instability for the GT Cut 3, so the Turbo is probably gonna be the same, right? But of course, the overall upper feels way more supportive, you know what I mean? Way more sturdy, and also from the actual sole of the shoe, this shoe feels a lot stiffer, right? And also a lot more rigid. You know, the GT Cut 3 was still pretty rigid, right? But it's a little bit softer feeling for the overall sole of the shoe as well as the upper, you know what I mean? So that also gives it a pretty kind of like different feel, which of course is not bad, it's not good, it's just dependent on your personal preference, of course. But yeah, there is a support and lockdown there. Moving on to the weight of the shoe, I mean, the GT Cut 3 Turbo was pretty light, but this is probably gonna be a little bit lighter, right? The original? Yeah, the original GT Cut 3 is 10.9 ounces, and this is like 11.65 ounces, right? Not that big of a weight difference, you know what I mean? It definitely is a little bit heavier, but again, it's a very similar feeling shoe, but then like there's some aspects of it where it feels different, of course, right? First of all, the cushion, you know, the step-in coverage is a little bit better here in the Turbo. The upper, like I said, is stiffer and also like a lot more supportive feeling, with the overall more rigid sole. Makes it feel a little bit more kind of like supportive and a sturdier feeling than the GT Cut 3. I feel like this is more, it still has a really nice supportive, like springy feel to it, don't get me wrong. Like comparing to like the Sabrina 2, the Jaw 2s, which is extremely soft, you know what I mean? This is definitely like a lot more like sturdy feeling than those shoes, but comparing it to the Turbo, it is a little bit softer feeling, which is just a different feel, you know what I mean? So there is the weight there. Moving on to the aesthetics, Turbo definitely looks way better to me. I don't know if it's just this colorway though, but also some of the PEs, right? The NBA players like Cade and also Drew Holiday were wearing, you know, GT Cut 3 Turbo PEs, and I really like the overall like aesthetic of the shoe. I definitely feel like it looks cleaner than the original GT Cut 3. So tell us what you guys think looks better down in the comment section below. So wrapping things up, yeah, it definitely feels like a little bit of an improvement in my personal opinion, right? The traction, similar, right? Cushion, very similar, but step-in coverage a little bit better here in the Turbo. The upper, like I said, the Turbo is still soft, but just feels a little bit more supportive. And also, I do like kind of like the springier feel that it has right now. And it'll probably get a little bit softer once I break it in, but still have a really nice kind of like springy feel to it compared to the GT Cut 3, even though this is still really, really nice. You know what I mean? So, I mean, again, like if you want the lighter, a more minimal and also kind of like softer feeling shoe while still having a nice bit of springiness from the original GT Cut 3, then this is a great option. Like this was still a really, really nice shoe, right? The Turbo, again, is just, like I said, a little bit stiffer, a little bit springier, a little bit more supportive feeling. So yeah, as far as like what I like better right now, I think I like the Turbo a little bit better, you know? So there is that. I really like what they did, you know, with the Turbo. They just made some minor adjustments, some minor improvements in my personal opinion, but it still is a little bit better, you know? So anyways, that about concludes my initial comparison between the GT Cut 3 Turbo and the original GT Cut 3. Again, if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, I try to leave in the free link in the description box, but that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.